Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an update on the ongoing impact on the global economy of the war in Iran, and specifically to give you an update as to what's happening with the negotiations between the USA and Iran that have been happening in Pakistan. But before we get into all of that, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? It really helps with the algorithm and also puts a smile on my face. Now, the big development over the weekend is that the latest talks between the United States and Iran have failed to reach an agreement. And this is a significant shift in sentiment. After 21 hours of meetings, the two parties could not reach an agreement, and so the USA delegation has now gone home. And this is going to cause major problems in the global markets because there was a growing sense that we might finally be moving towards some form of permanent de-escalation. The markets had started to stabilise, oil prices had eased back from the highs that we'd seen in the early stages of the war, and there was cautious optimism that diplomacy might succeed where the conflict had not. However, that optimism is now fading. These negotiations were not short or superficial. They lasted, as I say, for over 21 hours consecutively, spread across intense sessions, with both sides attempting to bridge what are very deep entrenched differences. There was a clear effort on both sides to explore potential compromises, but despite that prolonged engagement, no breakthrough was achieved. Instead, the outcome appears to be a complete impasse. The US delegation has now left Pakistan, and there are currently no confirmed plans to reconvene talks in the immediate future. So rather than progress, what we are seeing is a reset back to the position of uncertainty. And when you look at the core issues, it becomes clear why this has happened. The first and most fundamental sticking point remains Iran's nuclear program. The United States, supported by Israel, is demanding that Iran halts its uranium enrichment activities. From their perspective, it's essential because they believe that Iran is moving closer to developing a nuclear weapon. That's basically why this war started, because the USA and Israel believe that Iran were on the verge of finalising that weapon. Iran, however, is not prepared to concede on this issue. It continues to insist that the nuclear program is for peaceful civilian purposes, primarily energy generation through its nuclear power program, and it views enrichment as a sovereign right that every country in the world has. During these talks, there was no indication from Iran that it was willing to abandon or significantly scale down that program. So the positions remain directly opposed. One side sees it as a red line for security, the other sees it as a red line for sovereignty. The second major issue, and arguably the one with the most immediate economic consequences, is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the most critical choke points in the global energy system. A substantial portion of the world's oil and gas flows through this narrow shipping lane on a daily basis, and any disruption has an immediate impact on global supplies and pricing. At the outset of the negotiations, there were tentative signs of improvement. Data showed that a limited number of oil tankers, including Chinese vessels, were able to transit the strait safely. That created a sense that tensions might be easing, even if only temporarily. But that progress has not been sustained. Following the breakdown in talks, reports indicate that some vessels have altered course or turned back entirely to avoid the region. That behaviour represents a sharp increase in the perceived risk and highlights the fragility of the situation. Iran has not agreed to fully reopen the strait, and it's clearly using access as a point of leverage in negotiations. The consequence of that is renewed disruption to global shipping and energy flows. The third key area of disagreement relates to security guarantees. The United States is seeking confirmation that shipping routes are safe, including assurances that naval mines have been cleared and that commercial vessels will not be targeted. Iran has not provided those guarantees, and without them, shipping operators remain reluctant to commit vessels to the route, which further reduces traffic and tightens supply. So when you bring these factors together, it becomes evident that the gap between the two sides is not marginal. These are structural disagreements, and they are not easily resolved through short-term negotiation. At the same time, the broader regional situation remains highly unstable. There have been continued reports of missile exchanges involving Israel and Lebanon, and Iran is insisting that any ceasefire arrangement must include its regional allies. It's also accusing the United States and Israel of breaching earlier understandings, which further undermines trust and makes progress even more difficult. So this is not simply a bilateral negotiation. It is part of a wider interconnected conflict with multiple actors and competing priorities. From an economic perspective, the implications are significant. When the ceasefire was initially announced, markets responded positively. Equity markets rallied, oil prices pulled back, and there was a sense that the immediate risk had been reduced. That reaction was based on the expectation that negotiations would lead to a more permanent resolution. With those negotiations having failed, that expectation is now being reassessed. The most immediate impact is on oil markets. If the Strait of Hormuz remains partially restricted or subject to ongoing disruption, global supply is constrained. And when supply is constrained, prices move higher. We've already seen how quickly prices can respond to developments in this region. And if the current situation persists, there is a realistic possibility that oil prices will move back above $100 per barrel in a very short space of time, possibly even on Monday. That has wide-ranging consequences. Higher oil prices increase transportation costs, raise production expenses, and ultimately feed through into higher prices for goods and services. That contributes to inflation at a time when many central banks are still trying to bring inflation under control. There are also implications for natural gas markets, particularly in Europe and Asia. Disruptions to supply can lead to higher energy costs, which in turn impact both households and industrial users. In addition, we're beginning to see pressure in certain supply chains. Energy-intensive industries such as fertilizer production and aluminium manufacturing are particularly exposed to rising input costs, and disruptions in those sectors can have knock-on effects across agriculture, construction and manufacturing. So the impact is broad, it's not confined to one sector or one region. And perhaps the most important point is that some of the damage has already been done. Even without further escalation in the war, the uncertainty created by the situation affects investment decisions, delays projects and reduces economic confidence. Those effects accumulate over time. If the situation continues without resolution, the impact becomes more pronounced, growth slows, costs remain elevated, and the outlook for the global economy in 2026 becomes increasingly challenging. Looking ahead, there is no clear indication of a near-term solution. The positions of the United States and Iran remain far apart, and there is no evidence that either side is prepared to make the concessions required to reach an agreement. That raises the risk of continued tension, further disruption, and potentially renewed escalation and fighting. From a market perspective, that means ongoing volatility and elevated risk. So the overall summary of today's video is that the latest round of negotiations between the United States and Iran has ended without agreement after approximately 21 hours of negotiations. The key sticking point remains Iran's nuclear program, the status of the Strait of Hormuz, and the issue of security guarantees for shipping. At the same time, regional tensions remain high, and there are ongoing conflicts involving Israel and Lebanon. As a result, the outlook for the global economy has deteriorated, oil prices are now under upward pressure, supply chains are being disrupted, and inflation risks are increasing once again. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as and when they occur. Hopefully you found today's video useful, informative and thought-provoking. That's what I'm trying to do, provoke some thoughts. If you have liked what I've said, or maybe you didn't like it but you thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. Please scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below if you'd like to get involved in that. It's another way of funding the channel. Thank you also to everyone that's supported me in other ways. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much for that support. I really do appreciate it. Helps to keep me motivated and making as many videos as possible. And finally, just like to mention my new venture, Joe and Naz. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. We've just launched our new video, and this one really is quite interesting and exciting because we've been to afternoon tea together. If you've been following my other food videos, you'll know that I've visited a lot of afternoon teas. I'm becoming a bit of an expert on the topic, but this is the first time that I've done one with somebody else. It gives a really different perspective, and I think it's quite interesting and also quite amusing. Should put a smile on your face. So please head over to the channel, check out that video, subscribe please, and also watch maybe some of the other videos because we need your help to hit all of the YouTube thresholds. Hopefully that video will put a smile on your face, but if it doesn't, then here's something else that definitely will.